hate doing introductions, it's always so awkward. Hey guys, it's Summer here, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be talking about my sort of meh or in-between books of 2020. This is the second video in a 3-part series that I'm doing to cover all the books I read in 2020. That's 34 books. In my last video I talked about the books that were my least favourite of 2020, so I will link that in the description if you want to check that out too, because that was the first video in this series. This video is the second video and I will be covering the books that were just kind of not my least favourites but not my favourites, so I didn't hate them, I didn't love them, they were just kind of there. Anyway, I have 7 books to talk to you about today, so I'm just going to go and do that. The first book I have to talk to you about is a parody of 50 Shades of Grey, just a very small book that I found. It's called 50 Shades of Grey. It's basically just a comedy about the erotic tension between a man and his shed, and so I found it funny. It was just short, I read it in like 15 minutes, maybe less, and there's really nothing else I can say about that. Like, it made me laugh, and there we are. But I didn't think it was like amazingly funny, but it was funny. So here we are, and that's all I've got to say about it, so there. The next one I have to show you is actually a manga. I don't read a lot of manga, because I don't do Japanese media a lot in general. Like, I don't like anime. Maybe just the style, I just don't do anime in general, but if you wanted a specific reason, boobs. There's too many boobs. But anyway, I thought I'd try reading some manga this year. I actually have a manga that I read that I'll be talking about in my favourite books of 2020 video when that comes out, so that's cool. But for now we've just got the sort of in-between manga. This is Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This is a horror manga. This essentially follows 2 characters in this town as they realise their town is cursed with spirals, and everything spirals out of control. Ha ha ha. I'm funny. I thought this book was very good up until the end, so that's really why this is in the meh section, because all of it had this very like sure theme, and I sort of had this idea of what the theme of the book was, and then there was just this sort of bizarre twist. I think I can say this without really being spoilers, but they went underground, and essentially what was underground just sort of, I don't know, it just wasn't like what I was expecting. It felt like different from the theme of the book. There's just something I didn't like about it, but apart from that, I thought the horror was done very well. It was very disturbing, and it was like body horror, I think is what people call it. And I found that all very good. But the ending sort of was a bit eh. I didn't have anything to say about the characters, especially because in horror books, they're generally not, you know, that great characters, so I didn't think I really have anything to say about the characters. Don't even remember their names, but I did enjoy reading it until the end. The next book is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This book almost made it onto my favourites list of 2020, but it just didn't end up doing that. I just decided it was sort of in between for me, so I put it in between. I did really enjoy reading it, but nah. The fucking radio is making noise. They Both Die at the End follows 2 characters set in this world where 24 hours before you die you get a call from this company called Deathcast, and they're like, yeah dude, you're gonna die. And then you're like, shit, I'm gonna die, what do I do now? And then you just get to live your life knowing that you're gonna die. And this follows 2 characters. One is called Rufus and one is called Mateo. And essentially they meet on this app called the Last Friends app, which is for people who have just found out they're gonna die. For people who want to meet up and hang out on their last day together. And this is about Rufus and Mateo spending their last day together. I really liked it. I thought it was a cool concept. I have some questions about like how that world works, why it works that way. You know, I wanted answers about Deathcast basically and how they knew these things, but that was a thing that was covered in the world and it said nobody knew how they knew it, and you know, it's just a thing that happened. Anyway, I liked the relationships that the characters had, and just I liked it. I didn't like it. I don't have anything to say about it. But yeah, this was a book and I enjoyed it and it was good, but it just wasn't my favourite book in the world, and I'm also very bitter about how it ended. It was a good ending, I just didn't want it to happen. The next book I read, I listened to it on audiobook, and it's Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. And this is basically the first book in the Twilight saga from Edward's point of view. If you don't know what Twilight is, it's about a girl called Bella who moves to a town called Forks, and it's all dreary there and boring, and she meets a vampire and she falls in love. Ta-da! And the series goes from there. And this is just the retelling of the first book from vampire that she fell in love with point of view. You know, it just made me realise how creepy Twilight actually was. I'm not sure why I ever liked it. I think Edward was weirdly self-aware. He kept on thinking, oh my god, I'm bad for her. And then he kept on hanging around Bella anyway. So like, there's really not much I can say about that apart from the fact that I just realised that Twilight was weirder than I remember it being. And Bella was boringer than I remember her being. And Edward was creepier than I remember him being. And Jasper and Alice were the same and I still like them. And also the audiobook was read by that dude who played Luke in Percy Jackson, which I found out near the end. And that's all I had to say. The next book I read was actually a Chinese translation. It's called Legend of the Condor Heroes, and this is the first book in that series. It's called Hero Born by Jin Young. Okay, so I'm just looking at the video that I filmed and I realised my summary for this was absolute garbage. So we're gonna go again here. This follows a boy called Guojing who is raised on the Mongolian steppe by Genghis Khan's army. He's loyal, humble, perhaps not altogether wise, and he's fated from birth to confront an opponent who is the opposite of him in every way. Privileged, cunning, and perfectly trained in the martial arts. Guided by his faithful Shifus, the 7 heroes of the south, Guojing must return to China to fulfill his destiny. But in a land riven by war and betrayal, his courage and loyalties will be tested at every turn. I think this is a very famous book in China. It says it's like the Chinese Lord of the Rings, and apparently I think it defined a lot of what martial arts books in China are today. That being said, because it defined them all, I've already watched some shows and stuff that were like that, so it wasn't that great and amazing to me. Plus, once again, with the frickin' translations, I don't know how the Chinese language works, so if they actually write like this undescriptively, if their language doesn't allow room for that or something. But I just found the writing was it just lost everything in it, like there was nothing. My imagination was like working all the time, but not in the way it should have to. Books should build the pictures for me. I shouldn't have to be making up my own pictures to make myself feel like I'm in the story. I did like this book. It was good. I liked the characters. They were fun. It was great to read about. You know, there was some great moments in here that I really liked. But I would say everything was pretty predictable. But I did like Guojing. He was a nice enough character. I didn't hate him. Didn't annoy me. But no, yeah, I mean, it was a good story, but it was a story that I've seen before. And the writing, like, I don't know if it's the translator's fault or if that's just how Chinese writing comes off anyway. But that really took away from the story. It was like, you know how they tell you when you write, show, don't tell? Well, this was like all tell. But that's pretty much all I have to say about this book. And that's that. The next book I also read on audiobook, and that is The Boy at the Back of the Class by, I have no idea how to say the name, Ajali Q. Ralph, with an act like I know how to pronounce names that aren't English. This book follows a girl called Alexa, I think her name was. She's around 8 or 9 years old, and one day the empty seat at the back of her class gets taken by this boy called Ahmet. And Ahmet is a refugee from Syria who's been separated from his family. Essentially the story follows Alexa as she attempts to befriend him and help him find his family again. And it was a nice enough story. I will say that there was this one part in it that I can't really say like without spoiling it. Because this was a kid's book, I think it was something I didn't find very realistic. You know, like things happen in kids' books and you're like, that never happened in real life. So I think that took away from my enjoyment of the story, but it was a kid's book, so it was kind of supposed to be like that, and I went into it knowing it was a kid's book. That being said, everything else about the story I did enjoy. I enjoyed Alexa and her friends, and I really liked Ahmet. And I thought the rest of the book was great. Alexa learning and like asking her mother about what like Syrians like to eat and stuff like that because she wanted to become friends with Ahmet. I thought that was all very sweet. But apart from that, I don't have much to say about the book. The next 2 books I have, well, I'll talk about them separately, but they're both Leigh Bardugo books. We have Ninth House and Shadow and Bone. I'll talk about Shadow and Bone first. This is the first book in the Grisha trilogy. This is in my meh books video because I found it meh. Overall, with Leigh Bardugo, I don't quite understand why people like the story so much. It was a fine enough story, but it just didn't like present me with anything I thought I hadn't like seen before or that I thought was particularly amazing. This is set in a land called Ravka, and a part of this land was essentially cursed with darkness, and this darkness is known as the Shadow Fold. There's a section of land that people struggle to pass through because it's filled with monsters. And this follows a girl called Alina Starkov, as one day when she's passing through the Shadow Fold, she discovers that she has this dormant power that she never knew existed. Because of this, she's ripped away from everything she knows and sent to be trained with the Grisha, who are basically people who can wield magic like she can. And they're led by this dude called the Darkling. The Darkling essentially believes that because of Alina's power, he can finally destroy the Fold and get rid of all the darkness there that plagues the land. But things may not be as they seem. I really have nothing to say about it. Like, that's the thing. I don't have anything to say about this book. Like, I just didn't really care about anyone particularly. I wasn't entirely sold on like the climax of the book either. It wasn't that like I predicted the reveals in the book, it was just I didn't care, like I wasn't surprised by them either. And it's not that this is a bad book, I just don't think it was a book that I enjoyed because I've read books that are quite similar to it. So yeah, my feelings about this book are meh. I think that's just me though. I don't think the book was bad, I just didn't like it very much. Ninth House was somewhat better. I think, honestly, the thing about Leigh Bardugo's writing and characters are, I think I find her worlds fascinating, but the characters don't particularly draw me in.
Okay, I'm back because I failed to summarise Ninth House as well, so yippee. Alex Stern is the most unlikely member of Yale's freshman class. Raised in the Los Angeles hinterlands by a hippie mum, Alex dropped out of school early and into a world of shady drug dealer boyfriends, dead-end jobs, and much, much worse. By age 20, in fact, she is the sole survivor of a horrific, unsolved, multiple homicide. Some might say she's thrown her life away, but at her hospital bed, Alex is offered a second chance to attend one of the world's most elite universities on a full ride. What's the catch, and why her? Still searching for answers to this herself, Alex arrives in New Haven, tasked by her mysterious benefactors with monitoring the activities of Yale's secret societies. These 8 windowless tombs are well known to be haunts of the future rich and powerful, from high-ranking politicos to Wall Street and Hollywood's biggest players, but their occult activities are revealed to be more sinister and more extraordinary than any paranoid imagination might conceive.
I liked the premise of this book. I liked the ideas that went into it. I liked the whole Yale secret societies, dark magic. I liked the world. I didn't really care about the characters. And Alex, like, she was a good character, I guess. I just don't think I really cared about her. I just didn't care about it. But I really liked the world. So I will read the next book for this when it comes out, because I want to know what happens while I don't particularly give a shit about the characters at the same time. I'm going to be honest, I don't remember most of the characters beyond Darlington and Alex. I don't have a lot to say, but I did think the world, like the idea for this world, was very good. Pretty cover though. So yeah, that's like the end of the video. I have nothing else to say. Bye. We're gonna hope this is good enough to edit, because I have a feeling it wasn't.